By 1981, the Muppets were on top of the world, and the success of the Muppet movie and 5 seasons of the show, but Jim Henson wanted to continue to push the boundaries of the medium, leading to the conception of a puppet fantasy film and a show that would stop war, the freshest on the mind being the fantasy. However, with the risk of character unfamiliarity, that may have created the issue of getting the project off the ground. But coming back to Lou Grade, he got the fantasy off the ground with the expense of the Muppet movie 2, simultaneously greenlighting risk and a higher chance of security. The Muppet movie 2 was seemingly in pre-production as early as the Muppet Show Season 5 was airing. The oldest surviving announcement being from Muppet Show Fan Club Magazine Volume 2, Number 6. Additionally advertising Season 5 in the same issue. A TV special titled The Muppets Go to the Movies was also created as a tie-in to the Muppet Movie 2. The special consisting of Muppet Show-esque sketches parodying famous movies, including The Wizard of Oz. It's kind of like El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie, given that it's like a bonus to the original series. Despite being an advertisement for the Muppet Movie 2, it's a fun special and a sort of extra episode to the original Muppet Show. It hasn't been officially re-released, but it's available on YouTube unofficially, and if you like the original show, check it out, even if it's only available in complete dog shit quality. But the final title of the Muppet Movie 2 was...
Wow!
The Great Muppet Caper.
Nice title.
Yes. I would have said I had a frog in my throat, but I won't say that.
Wait,
But
okay,
anyhow.
how about if I... Perhaps the substance of Jim Henson's genius was the ability to see wonder far off in crazy directions and get people to follow him there. Roberta Moran, Dover Plains, New York.
The Great Muppet Caper would serve as a movie within a movie, a standard for some future Muppet narratives. Our protagonists play themselves as detectives. The concept also borrows elements from Sesame Street, where Kermit has the alternate identity of a news reporter. I'm also curious if the concept of making a detective story with puppets was inspired by the film Charlie McCarthy Detective. With this parody and hypothetical nature, there is a prominent tonal shift in comparison to the Muppet movie, which had an emotional edge to it. Great Caper taking the direction of a pure comedy. There is no heart in the movie whatsoever, but that is not an issue for me whatsoever. It is easily the funniest Muppet movie, just non-stop great jokes at the expense of eliminating an opportunity for any multi-dimensional characters, having a lot of smart, catch-you-off-guard humor that the characters have continued to succeed at.
You know, if you put enough sugar in this stuff, it tastes just like ginger ale.
If you like laughs in your Muppets more than anything else, you're probably gonna prefer this one. Again, the meta humor isn't Rick and Morty dog shit, and I love the inclusion of a fake outtake building on the concept of a movie within the movie.
Piggy, you're overacting.
What?
You're overacting. You're hamming it up.
I am not. I am trying to save this movie.
Oh, yeah? Well, save your performance instead.
The general narrative absurdity just overall benefits the plot. It's riddled with stupid conveniences, but it's so stupid that it loops back around to being genius. For example, Miss Piggy's fake address actually being the real address. It's one of the best examples of genre bending I've ever seen. It's a detective musical comedy, homaging Hollywood's early classy American musicals and detective stories. The cinematography and set design is similar to the previous, where it's super in-depth with environments being set in England. It's a gritty Victorian-looking movie, but it's dull in a well-detailed way that's great to look at. Happiness Hotel, which is extensively communicated to be a shithole, detailed excellently being a shithole. The technical quality in terms of absurdist shit for the characters to do is improved as well. I mean, like, you got Muppets on a hot air balloon, you got the whole squad on bikes with tricks, you got Muppets underwater. There's a whole lot more full body shots and interaction with crowds too. There's also way more practical slapstick, especially with the use of Muppets driving. The human characters' performances are ridiculously hammy and do a great job of benefiting the general absurdity. Speaking of ham, Miss Piggy is easily at her best here. Like I said, I don't think Miss Piggy has ever been the best handled in movie narratives, but here as a shit post where she's more integral to the story, she has way more to do. And being a pure comedy, the lack of genuine relationship drama isn't an issue because it's not really an objective. Having a distinguishable main trio of Kermit, Gonzo, and Fozzie with Piggy as the love interest, with the rest of the ensemble conveniently staying at the same hotel. So the gang's all here while simultaneously not having a disorganized movie. An issue it could have easily suffered from having 20 protagonists and whatnot. Again, with the general general absurdity, the songs offer nothing deep, but are just really fun. They were written by Sesame Street's Joe Raposo, so there's some childlike whimsicality benefiting the tone because it's a dumb comedy. And Gonzo meets God, based. There's nothing deep about the movie, and that's its greatest strength. It does multiple things better than its predecessor, although I still do prefer its predecessor with its heart and humor balance. But it is easily the #1 funniest Muppet movie, even if it isn't necessarily the #1 best. It was not a huge hit in comparison to the previous Muppet movie, but it still did over double its budget, so it wasn't a huge loss. The pure comedy direction was a huge risk, and the word caper in the title was even criticized, since that's an old school word for far-fetched story, referencing its pure comedy direction, but doesn't really get the concept of a mystery comedy across immediately. But that could be attributed to its genre bending, which it does sparingly, so it's easier to actually watch than explain. As Caper was being produced, so was the fantasy film, the final title being The Dark Crystal, and the anti-war show Fraggle Rock, all go in release order. The Dark Crystal was co-directed by Frank Oz, his first directing credit, which would later affect the direction of the Muppets. But the consensus of it being groundbreaking stylistically is its greatest flaw. Despite it technically featuring Muppets, it was specifically designed to be as different as possible to its predecessors, the style not being paired with narrative substance. The puppets more resembled the Land of Gorge grotesque but impressive designs, but don't expect a narration from Kermit like in Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas.
Hi all, this is Kermit the Frog, and I'm here to tell you the story about Emmett Otter's...
I did actually have this on VHS growing up. Disclaimer, I used VHS until like 2014, I'm not that old. My first true exposure to the Henson Company beyond 90s and 2000 Sesame Street, rest in peace, do the alphabet. But like everybody's watched Sesame Street, it's integral to the American childhood to anybody born past 69. And I did not like this movie as a kid, and I loved The Phantom Menace growing up, so the storytelling bar was really low. Unable to appreciate its technical qualities as a child, I was bored out of my mind, and I loved weird practical puppet like the original Star Wars trilogy growing up. The Jabba's Palace stuff was some of my favorite stuff in the franchise at the time. And I still love that entire hour-plus sequence, even if it makes no sense as a rescue mission, and it should have been 10 minutes from a narrative perspective. And of course, Return of the Jedi, also unknowingly featuring Frank Oz. As an adult, I don't love it, but I still appreciate it. So if Crystal was handled better, it could have been the next Star Wars, since the original trilogy was gonna wrap up next year in '83. The actual plot is that our protagonist Jen is the last of the species of the Mystics and is attempting to find a shard of crystal that will maintain peace. The actual crystal being held by the villainous Skeksis. So it's up to Jen to repair the Dark Crystal, I think. It's like the Problem Solvers, but with good puppets and without the seizures, but still hard to contemplate. It's very noisy in a grotesque way that's not obnoxious, but simultaneously not the most investing. Lots of kids were scared by it. I've heard stories of people being frightened of it as children. I mean, like, a grotesque creature's face literally disintegrates surrounded by its family 11 minutes in. And I wasn't terrified as a child, but I was bored. The film being overly reliant on its actual mythology, for example, the Skeksis doing their ritual practices for such a ridiculous amount of time, limiting the action and adventure. It looks amazing, but it lacks emotional weight. Feels like a series of creature doing weird shit and less like a movie. The mythology just being overused and underdeveloped in general. It's oddly quiet, with mostly noise being nature ambience and weird creature noises. The villains feel like the protagonist here, just given the amount of focus they have, but without much actually happening. The recurring theme of endangered species as a result of war creates a very unsatisfactory ending. Like, yeah, the day is saved, but there's barely any lives to live peacefully anymore. It's an intended all-ages movie that you can really only like as an adult. It's too bizarre for kids to contemplate, despite not being mature, and there's not the most for adults to appreciate beyond the groundbreaking production value, but it's still still so groundbreaking that it's only worth watching for adults, but it's not a great movie either. It's like a really shitty brew. Like, yeah, kids can't drink alcohol, it's only for adults. You'll probably drink it because it's free. But is it the good kind? Not really. For every amazing thing about it, there's about 10 dull elements. The Dark Crystal kind of sucks ass, but its redeeming qualities would make it beloved later. But at the box office, it did okay, making $41 million on a $25 million budget. But on the bright side, Fraggle Rock premiered to success, and like I said, the conception was based on a motive to stop war. The show was released near the end of the Cold War, a time of geopolitical tension between the United States and the USSR, a hostility that could have led to military action between two superpowers and worth consequences. The concept lifting elements of the species of the Frackles Gonzo is based on.
Hey, give me a cigar over there.
Here it is, boss.
Thank you. You do good work, fella.
You criminal.
The conflicts often being a result of species interference between the four species. The Fraggles, the Doozers, the Gorgs, and the humans referred to by the others as the silly creatures, serving as stand-ins for different countries. The main Fraggles themselves are all exceptionally multidimensional, all having different flaws and personalities, which allows their motives to conflict, but without them turning against each other to provide the moral of cooperation. I swore I first saw Fraggle Rock at Chuck E. Cheese, except there's no proof that Fraggle Rock was ever included on the TVs at Chuck E. Cheese. However, Veggie Tales segments were, so I'm probably misremembering that.
Here is Larry the Cucumber.
Given the Muppet Show's ending, it was understood that more creative risks had to be funded through the guaranteed profits of familiar characters. So a third Muppet Show spin-off movie was already being planned. Given Hence's involvement in so much elsewhere, it was decided that Frank Oz would direct the third Muppet feature. Muppets Take Manhattan is considered the black sheep of the franchise because it's safe to say that it's different. And you're either gonna love it or hate it, gaining a rather divisive reputation in following years. Jerry Jewell, the signature Muppet writer, was also not involved. Both thematically and stylistically, the tonal shift is incredibly noticeable. The plot features the Muppets attempting to get a Broadway musical off the ground. Sound familiar? Well, the plot was seemingly based off the failed attempt at the actual Muppet Broadway musical prior to the show, holding a similar format of comically oversimplifying the story of the character's history similar to the Muppet movie. Of course, this one being a lot less accurate to the previous in terms of real-world parallels. A return to form with more drama than ever, kind of like Cars 3, but not dog. Additionally, contemplating risks from the main conflict of Manhattan Melodies going nowhere, making sacrifices for food and stops throughout the journey, being even less wacky than the Muppet movie, the conflicts featuring less jokes throughout, even non-comical arguments, because that's ruthless entertainment.
Hey, Kermit, do you think we should change the script? Yeah, Kermit, what should we do?
I don't know. How should I know? Why are you always asking me anyway? Can't you take care of yourselves? I don't know what to do next. We failed, okay? We tried and we failed.
Kermit even getting hit by a car not for laughs and suffering as a result of unintentionally pursuing a lifestyle he's specifically attempting to avoid being stuck in. The film additionally showing the Muppets forced to comply to careers not suiting their interests, adding an entire sense of artistic realism, and that's who the movie is truly for, artists. Much of the film's marketing was built around the conflict of Piggy's desire for marriage being prevented from fiscal unstability.
You can tell us if you and Kermit get married in the film.
Well, Kermit, Johnny, I know this might hurt you, but there's something momentous happen in the film. There is kind of a little wedding kind of thing. I can't talk about it, though.
The actual conclusion of this Muppet timeline having Kermit and Piggy married. Each Muppet project just exists in its own timeline, which isn't really supposed to be questioned, whether a movie is a movie within a movie or an in-universe conflict. The actual wedding is brilliantly executed, taking a more episodic nature of showing the musical numbers of somebody's getting married, showcasing the phases and emotions of a wedding ceremony. The film also introduces a standard that would be more prominent in addition to having a human protagonist, taking the familiar aspect of the human special guest. Rizzo the Rat is also given more prominent role here, and he'd be even more prominent in future projects. The film also introduces Muppet babies here, which are used as a hypothetical scenario to display Piggy's appreciation for Kermit's presence, but was unknowingly a start of another huge Muppet show. Muppet Babies was seen as viable before Manhattan even released, so a new Henson Company merchandise juggernaut got a Saturday morning cartoon series. Muppet performers would not perform their characters at risk of scheduling conflicts since it was the first animated Muppet show. Henson would not be heavily involved, but he had strict quality control. This was '84, the era of mainstream bug juice. The series being designed to have reoccurring core values as a children's program and to make sure the Muppet cast was used sparingly, especially in comparison to the substance of Sesame Street and Fraggle Rock, trying to make a larger impact with the next Muppet cash cow on the rise, featuring the ensemble of Muppet babies found in Manhattan with the additions of Baby Bunsen and Beaker. In an attempt for further series diversity, Skeeter, Scooter's sister, was introduced specifically for this cast, the parental figure to the babies being the nursery's nannies whose face is never shown. Statler and Waldorf were added toward the end of the run and were not de-aged. Baby Bean Bunny would also be introduced, Bean Bunny being introduced in a special in 1986 titled The Tale of Bunny Picnic. The series would focus on the Muppet Babies' conflicts in the nursery, with creativity and cooperation often being the resolution, taking elements from the Muppet Show of performing various acts, this time through their imagination to overcome their struggles rather than performing a show, often incorporating their imaginations collaboratively. In these imagination segments, pre-existing movie footage was often incorporated, which was viewed as impressive at the time given that the visual samples were cleared, also including parodies of recognizable movies like The Wizard of Oz. Muppet Babies aired for 8 seasons, longer than the original Muppet Show, but containing less episodes, which opened the market for more Muppets in animation, with a Fraggle Rock animated series which was cancelled after 1 season with its greatest flaw, inferiority. There was also a cancelled series called Little Muppet Monsters, which featured a variety show of puppet segments of familiar characters, puppet segments of the Little Muppet Monsters, and animated Muppet segments, and was cancelled as a result of quality control. Manhattan made even less than Caper, but was still viable. But what it spawned allowed far more creative risk as a result of all the profit from those Baby Fozzie plushies. The Muppet Show had a successful theatrical trilogy, so why not Sesame Street, which by Manhattan's release was on season 16, leading to the film Sesame Street Presents Follow That Bird, which would be Sesame Street's first attempt at a theatrical release. The plot is way more absurd than you'd expect for a Sesame Street movie, attempting to increase the scale, given that it's similar to the Muppet movie of adapting a variety show, featuring a bird government getting Big Bird to revoke his residency from Sesame Street, but then regretting his decision and running away from his adopted family. So it's a race for his friends back at Sesame Street to find him. And as it was a Sesame Street adaptation, the element of animated segments were even included, here relating to the narrative. It's never in your face, which is calm and reasonable, as well as not being too complex, as it is still a preschool movie. There's nothing deep about it, which is appropriate for its target audience. You get to see tons of familiar Sesame Street locations at a larger and more detailed scale than ever, which is a fun production upgrade.
Ha! One John gets Goonie! Hi, Mom.
The film was a moderate loss, which could mainly be attributed to the limited audience of preschool movies. But going back to new creative ventures that Henson wanted to prioritize, there was a desire to make another fantasy, given that The Dark Crystal wasn't greatly received, leading to the conception of Labyrinth. Bringing up Star Wars again, George Lucas of Star Wars would help produce. Henson taking another great risk with another fantasy. This time tried to retain more elements of successful Muppet projects, with elements of The Dark Crystal. Although it has now been argued by many, including that myself, that the lack of story was Crystal's greatest flaw. Humans and musical numbers would be incorporated similar to the traditional Muppet formula. One of the main concepts Henson wanted in the film was a rock star main antagonist, Jareth, the King of the Goblins, played by David Bowie, who gives a perfectly hammy performance. He just plays himself in a fantasy film, practically. Bowie would also contribute music to the film, although being limited in its overall musical direction, only having 5 musical numbers throughout. Magic Dance is the highlight. It's such a stupid dance number, but the rhyme scheme is ridiculous and charmful. The film actually focusing on the teenage sibling Sarah wishing that her infant brother was taken away by goblins. And then the figure of speech actually happens. Being forced to travel through a labyrinth in an attempt to reach the goblins to get her brother back, running into various absurd creatures throughout. Overall taking less risks than Crystal, but still being an improvement over Crystal, I'd argue. It's definitely more charmful with its increased whimsicality, as it is a fantasy film at the end of the day. And even if the plot isn't the most consistent, and it doesn't really benefit to its simplicity, similar to Crystal, it's the tech behind it, plus David Bowie, which alone makes it worth a watch. Tech Technically, the physical environments and the Goblin Army scenes stand out on the basis of quantity of disgusting, twitching creatures all at screen at once. The actual practical complication design in the labyrinth is astounding. You can visually sympathize with the protagonist given its sheer complication and similarities. Fiscally and creatively, a huge risk that was considered worse than a Dark Crystal and performed horribly financially. But meanwhile, back on television, other specials were created with familiar casts, like The Muppets, a celebration of 30 years, a clip show specials showcasing the history of the Muppets up until that point, with original award show sketch segments including reappearances from some of the earliest Muppets.
Hey, I just have one question, man. How come you look so much better now than you did then?
Well, that's one of the advantages of being a Muppet. By the way, where is Yorick? Oh, Yorick, yes. Anyway, let's remember all the help that I've had through the years. Yorick, will you stop?
Also celebrating the history, A Muppet Family Christmas being one of the most memorable TV specials because it is the definitive crossover between Muppets, Sesame Street, and Fraggle Rock, all gathering at Fozzie's mother's house, featuring extensive interactions between the different casts. Sure, they'd cameo in each other's stuff all the time, but prior there was never anything you could call an actual crossover special. It's a crossover that's not very ambitious, and that's why it works. There was clear thought into who should interact with who, mainly characters who wouldn't typically interact like the Swedish chef attempting to cook Big Bird. Despite being the definitive crossover between beloved characters, the special is sort of obscure since it's entered copyright hell, so it's only available through its VHS release and rips of it, which are widely unofficially available, but it's free on YouTube and is a simple but overlooked part of its history. By 1989, the characters were far past icon status, but Henson wanted the cash cow to seemingly live on forever. Seemingly, with the fear of mismanagement of his characters after his life, Henson would desire the Muppets to be elsewhere. And who better to sell the Muppets to than Disney? And who had been the CEO of Disney since 1984? Michael Eisner, the same Michael Eisner that allowed the Muppet Valentine show to get off the ground. In 1989, Disney is now what is considered their dark age. The actual length of the dark age is debatable among nerds and historians. Some say from 1981 to 1988 because of the lack of viability from projects released around the time, but others say from Walt Disney's death in 1967 up until their mainstream resurgence in 1989 later that year. 1989 to 1999 being referred to as the Disney Renaissance. Disney eras are debatable in general since there's so much that could be factored in from a fiscal and opinionated quality standpoint, but in 89, Disney was about to enter what would be considered their Disney Renaissance. Guys, why does it look like Vegas? The shift in terms of audience reception could be attributed to the quality control, attempting to recapture the very viable magic of Walt Disney. Obviously, in the quote dark age, Disney was in a slump, but they didn't necessarily go anywhere. Disney was capable of keeping their signature characters popular, not listening to what any box office underperformances were telling them. Something Henson could clearly sympathize with, always relying on the cash cow to keep the company going amongst its other failures. Henson and Eisner agreeing that the Muppets in their ensemble would be a great addition to reforming the quality control within the company. So with a popular franchise to brighten the mood, the Muppets were going to Disney World.
Guess who picked it out?
Oh, it's a Goofy hat.
Goofy picked it out?
Yeah, terrific.
Naturally.
Well, thank you.
Before that, though, on February 5th, 1989, Sesame Street songwriter Joe Raposo would pass away.
Sing a song.
But by 1990, the Muppets would be present at Disney World. On May 6th, the TV special meant to commemorate and advertise future park collaborations was created, titled The Muppets Go to Walt Disney World, featuring the Muppets trespassing into Disney World and exploring many of the park attractions available at the time, ending with the conclusion of the Muppets meeting Mickey Mouse animated himself.
Come on in! Gosh, it sure is swell to see all the Muppets here at Walt Disney World. Welcome, everyone!
Oh, thanks, Mickey.
2 days prior to the premiere of the special, there was a promotional interview held on the Arsenio Hall show, additionally featuring Muppet performer Kevin Clash, most known for playing Elmo, but here playing Clifford, a Muppet introduced in the Jim Henson Hour, a short-lived experimental variety show.
Yes, Clifford. Clifford is our newest member of the band, and he's absolutely great. Mm-hmm. And I was told he'd come out right after a commercial. If you take a commercial.
Okay, we'll take a commercial. We'll come right back, and we'll talk to Clifford.
Okay.
We'll be back.
This shitty, unnecessarily long miniseries is brought to you by Ko-Fi, a service that allows the Dr. X Henry Show to be supported directly because YouTube hates art and poor people. They will take any opportunity to snatch dollars from people who give their site traction. This helps me not be homeless and make more episodes. For a small monthly fee, you can get early previews and behind-the-scenes stuff and new shitty videos, as well as just tip the show directly. A tremendous deal for sociopaths who watch this garbage. Link in the description below.
It's very painful. She has a right that'll lay you right out.
That's just an old piece of mosquito caught in your throat there.
Yes. I would have said I had a frog in my throat, but I won't say that. No.
Wait.
But
Okay.
anyhow.
How about if I go to another subject and not make you uncomfortable with
Good.
this?
I'd appreciate not talking about things personal like those things anyhow.
Okay.
Henson is noticeably sick in the interview. Henson is 53 in this interview and had a cold. This cold is arguably a result of his constant international traveling, a cold that escalated into death.
Sing a song.
Puppeteer Jim Henson today was unexpected. Henson died from complications of pneumonia, which a New York hospital spokesperson says was untreated for 3 days by Henson. He leaves behind a community of children taught and entertained by his Muppets.
Henson would pass away on May 16, 1990, the same day as Sammy Davis Jr., as well as the air date of a special titled Sing, Sesame Street Remembers Joe Raposo and His Music, which Henson appears on camera in.
Joe, I remember his warmth. I think of Joe as a big warm teddy bear. Seeing him for the first time in several months, and always the big hug and the big smile and the friendliness and the open heart.
Henson's death is acknowledged within a disclaimer at the beginning of the special, since it was going to air on May 16th anyway. Henson had prepared for his inevitable passing by assuring his properties were in the hands of people carrying his spirit and vision. On July 2nd, 1990, Jim Henson's memorial would be held, but it wasn't your average memorial.
Children aren't usually taken to a funeral for fun, but a memorial service for puppet master Jim Henson today was a celebration of life for children of all ages.
One of Jim's favorite times in any production was the musical pre-record session.
Intertwined throughout with many memorial speeches from his team featuring performances of various songs from the Muppet catalog in their characters' voices.
Folks adore so and adore so even more so. Lydia, oh Lydia, that inside.
As well as Muppet Show's special guest, Harry Belafonte, performing, including all the associated performers at the time joining together for a rendition of just one person.
Making it 3. People you can say, believe in me.
Steve Whitmire, who performs Wembley Fraggle, is dressed in all green. Further continuing Memoriam, another TV special titled The Muppets Celebrate Jim Henson aired, which includes a collection of notable moments, some of which are the same from Celebration of 30 Years. In addition to Steven Spielberg commenting on Henson's contribution to film, Sesame Street special guest Ray Charles discussing the music of the Muppets, special guest Harry Belafonte reciting his speech from the Henson Memorial, given Belafonte's humanitarian background discussing many of the humanitarian values throughout Henson's work.
Those desperate places where parents watch their children grow, knowing they'll never be educated, who'll never have a chance at life as it should be. These same parents watch as Jim's creations for the first time not only put smiles on the faces of their children, but develop in them the appetite to learn, watching Sesame Street, and the ability to love because they see the love and the caring that exudes from the Muppets and the Henson family of creatures.
The special also featuring a reoccurring sketch of the Muppets failing to put on a show for their assigned Jim Henson tribute number, unknowing of that tribute being in memoriam.
Dear Kermit, my cousin Diane has a pet frog and she named him Kermit. And he could say hi just like you.
Isn't that sweet?
Yeah,
That's really...
I feel very sorry that your best friend Jim died. What? Died? Jim
died? But we were just starting to get to know him.
Perhaps the substance of Jim Henson's genius was the ability to see wonder far off in crazy directions and get people to follow him there. Roberta Moran, Dover Plains, New York.
Dear Kermit, I hope you feel better. I will miss Jim Henson too. I hope this letter makes you feel better. I love you. Bridget Kerwin, Peabody, Massachusetts.
You know, Mr. Henson was a very good, talented teacher. He will never be dead in my heart. Elizabeth Nicolette Edelman, Mountain Lakes, New Jersey.
While falling asleep that night, our 5-year-old daughter Blair said, "It's a good thing there are people who can do Jim Henson's job. He'll be with us every time we watch the Muppets. He'll be able to see them from heaven." The Reeser family, Las Vegas, Nevada.
We will miss you, Jim Henson. Matt.
Cancel.
What?
Cancel. Cancel the production number. Cancel everything.
No decision has yet been made about whether a puppeteer will ever be hired to replace Henson.
Kermit is noticeably missing, but shows up at the end of the performance of just one person.
What a good song. I knew you guys could do the tribute for Jim.
Kermit is played by Steve Whitmire. The man once nicknamed Kermit had become Kermit, unknowingly the apprentice of Jim.
Well, that just about brings us down to the end of another one, but before we go, let me thank you for being with us for our tribute to Jim Henson. And we'll be seeing you soon with more Muppet stuff, because that's the way the boss would want it.
However, the Disney deal was not finished, and overship complications only increased as a result of Henson's death.
We say, when you wish upon a star, your dreams come true.
Well, actually, what we say is, someday you'll find it, the Rainbow Connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
Uh-oh, they're starting to argue philosophy.
However, the Muppet Vision 3D Disney attraction was successfully created and is arguably Jim Henson's swan song. So to continue what was started, it was time to get the team back together. But that wasn't helped through another crucial loss, Richard Hunt passing away on January 7th, 1992, as it was the age of the AIDS epidemic. So what could be done to do the characters justice? Why not another movie?
Ron, what's going on here? What's wrong with Marty?
Oh, Marty's just fine. He just didn't get much sleep last night. He kept waking up asking me if it was here yet.
It's what here?
He sent away for a video of the Becky's Barn program, and he was so excited about it, he wanted to camp out here next to the post office until it came.
Oh, my. Bo, I didn't see you here. Boys and girls, it's Bo from Becky's Barn.
Hi, Professor. Is it here?